Okay, it is August 28, 2024. This is the Nefio SIG 2 meeting. Hope everybody can hear me okay. I do have some noise here today. There's a construction going on, so I hope it'll be all right. So we have some security related issues. There's one issue that Raul wanted to discuss and another one. Is he here on the call? He is not. Well, looking at the issue, I think maybe we can discuss it anyway. I wonder, did anybody else look at this or just me? Oh, I see Alexi commented. Or not?
No, I only I was only the glue between the guy who reported the issue and SIG security. I
Okay.
didn't look at it.
So I'm not sure why so many words were spilled on this. I think it's pretty obvious. Oops, I do have noise here, just a second. Does everybody hear the noises from my microphone?
Yeah, the last noise we heard.
Yeah, okay. I wonder if...
I mean, right now we're not hearing anything, Tom, right now.
Okay, good. Yeah. It'll come and go. So in my view, this is very easy. Yes, when we created Porch, we just gave everything, full permissions just to make development easier. Obviously, for production, I think we need to limit this to just exactly what the webhook would be allowed to change. So, yeah, but I don't know why Rahul wanted to discuss this more openly, but anyway, if anybody wants, they can look at this issue and comment. I think it's just an easy fix. So let's see. Again, I forget who put the, oh, Bala, I think you put this on the agenda, right?
Yes, yeah.
So maybe you'd like to present it. Oh, here the noise comes again, so.
Looks like the noise is gone after Tal got muted.
Noise is still there, I guess, but
so Tal is running the meeting. And
well, I guess, Bala, I mean, the point Tal was going in the agenda, right? So maybe you could talk about like point number 3 here, solidifying the foundation and what you meant by that. I think this, we had the question last time, but you weren't there. So maybe if you can just get us through your thought process, what you mean, and what would be like action item for SIG 2 here.
Yes, so I think we discussed this in one of the meetings. So we are thinking about a lot of use cases. For example, a lot of ORAN use cases. Some of the use cases may come in the future. For example, let's say we just in the ORAN meeting we talked about NF deployment using NF ORAN. So that requires status updates as a part of the ORAN 2 specifications. And similarly, we are talking about another use case in ORAN for terminating workloads. So that talks, I mean, obviously what that means is Nefio is able to, decommission workloads. So essentially what I meant by here that I think Nefio needs to support these fundamental use cases, day 1, day 2 changes, such as, decommissioning a cluster or a workload. It's when you commission it, you should be able to decommission it. And then there is a config to changes. How do I make a changes to an existing provision cluster or an existing provision workload? Very simple use case. And I mean that I know that can be a slippery slope, but I'm just saying at least one. I think we may have one. I also wanted to add status update. Can you add a status update there, Alexi? If you, I don't know who is presenting the talk, or I can add it later. Yeah. So then the
And it's still,
efficient release.
it's still
efficient
Tal, but
release.
he's on mute, so he still listens to us, but he wants to
Okay.
avoid the noise, I think.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool, thank you. Yeah, and then the efficient release mechanism is what we are discussing. We don't need to discuss that because we are discussing that in SIG 3 now. Like Liam wanted us to create a doc, and when Liam is back, we'll create a document and then take some actions in the SIG release side. Right now, our release process, we made a lot of progress from R1 to R2. Then R3 happened. We went with a different strategy of creating branches and stuff that that resulted in a few things. So that is, we want to make sure our release process is much more efficient than what it is today, and then that we will take care of in SIG 3. So essentially, for this purpose, solidifying the foundation event is fundamental use cases of deleting an entity that has been created, and then whatever is happening, how do we percolate the status update all the way to the user? So, and then if we can do that, then the higher order functions that we are trying to do, such as ORAN use cases, they can make use of them, and it will be, they don't need to wonder how these use cases can be realized. That's what I meant by those cases. I hope those become priority for R4, and then we can make the foundation a little bit solid.
Can you explain what the release mechanism is? I didn't entirely understand what release means
So
in this context.
Sorry, that is a SIG 3 item. I think that's what I said, Tal, that the release is, we are tackling in SIG 3. Whenever we do the release, I mean, you have been part of it. You've been innately part of it. It is not going so smoothly, right? So that's we started creating a documentation of release, what is happening today, and try to automate as much as possible. That will take care of
okay. I got it. I for some reason I thought releasing a cluster or something like that from the
okay.
management. Okay, totally misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So initially, I just put all the thoughts here. Then probably that is a SIG 3 item. Yeah. So that's what I meant. I mean, I think we should. I hope it becomes a priority for release 4 of this foundational blocks in the product.
So I think the first issue, decommissioning clusters, that's part of the ORAN user stories, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, decommissioning cluster, CNF, yes, there are 2 user stories in ORAN as well. But for them to realize, if the foundational blocks are there in FU, those user stories can be realized easily.
So
I mean, can we, for example, outside of ORAN context, let's forget ORAN.
yeah,
If we
okay.
create a cluster, yeah, can we delete it? If we create a CNF, can we decommission?
Well, I think I'm asking about the user stories because we are user story driven, right? In terms of where we're going to head for R4. So my fear is that if we raise such big feature issues, if they're not attached to a user story, I don't think they'll ever be implemented, right? If it's just a note here. Please go ahead, Wim.
Yeah, I think Bala, the way I look at it, Bala, please correct me if I'm wrong. What he is saying, these are foundational components. So if we cannot create a cluster and delete a deployment or delete a cluster, then it's use case independent from his perspective. That's how I read your statement here, Bala. Is that right?
Yes.
I'll explain my
absolutely.
question. Yeah, I did understand what Bala meant here, but I think that to make this actually effective, we need to explain exactly what it is, because decommissioning, well, we can decommission right now because we just delete it from, we just stop using it, right? But the question is, what is the user experience? What does the user intend to happen? Does it want to uninstall the site? Does it need to remove it from the inventory? So I think without a clear user story, decommissioning is almost meaningless, right? Because yeah, we support decommissioning right now, just don't use it, right? Just don't use the site. We need an explanation of what actually happens and for what context.
My understanding is that I think you want all the resources to be gone, right?
Right. Yeah.
So basically, you want it's all captured in the story. I think I understand what Tal is trying to say.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what Tal's saying is write it down what we want, right? And then we can prioritize it. And, yeah, I think it's not a bad idea to write down the requirement.
Yes, I'm willing. Yeah, we can write it down. That's fine. Yes, Tal, point well taken. But I mean, as a nephew, core group, we understand what it means here. So for yes, I think it will be expressed in the form of a story and maybe the Jira Epic also. But I hope I'm conveying the spirit of these points, as
Yeah.
foundational
I'm not
blocks.
criticizing, I'm just thinking how
Yes.
to move it forward. So I think actually raising this topic in SIG 1 would be good. Maybe SIG 1 can create general user stories, right? Or foundational user stories, as you call them. So they're not tied to any specific work group that they have right now, but they could be general in that sense, just to make sure that we're not losing sight of the foundational things, right?
Yeah, it's state architecture. It's a working group one stories kind of stuff. So, yes, we could do that. But what I'm trying to also convey is we should try to prioritize this, because the sooner we do this, it's better for the other use cases that we are trying to support.
Yeah, I agree. But my point again is that, yeah, we can prioritize this, but we need guidance on what it actually means. I mean, we can do this in SIG 2, but I feel like this is something that SIG 1 should own in terms of, okay, decommissioning. What do you exactly expect to happen, right? We can come up with something, but we're also working in our own environment with config sync, etc. It's not always going to be exactly the real world environment and what the carrier expects, right? Wim?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I raised my hand for. It's okay, right? On the general sense of way of working now, right? Because we used to do some stuff in SIG 2 and some stuff in SIG 1. Are we going in the mode where any new thing that we want to get through SIG 1? It's fine for me. I just want to clarify, because I think it might be good to clarify to the nephew organization. And I don't think it's a bad thing, by the way. But I'm just bringing it up just to make sure that the way of working, we are grown up more, right? So it might be good to clarify that's how we want to proceed from here.
Yeah, I think my point here is not to kind of shift responsibility, but rather to coordinate, right?
Yeah.
I think we kind of suffered from some lack of coordination in the past. This has improved a lot. And I think part of what we've been doing right now is kind of, well, SIG 1 prepared user stories, and now they're handing it over to SIG 2. But I don't think any of us wants this to be just kind of a one-way street, right? I think we'd want this to be back and forth. SIG 1 wants our feedback. We want their guidance. It should be more interactive, right? So I think that's my point, right?
I think it's a good thing, right? So don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, does that make sense to everybody? Does everybody understand what we're trying to do here, right?
I think this is how it's been since Nephew 1 release. We have been saying the same thing. I know John was trying to say Nephew SIG 1 release will be more like product management. Yeah, I think the roles and responsibilities of what you're trying to say makes sense.
But I think it also goes down a bit further, Vish, right? Because in the past, and even for release 3 and stuff like that, they were always saying, please SIG 2, tell us what you want to do, right? And then there is SIG 1, but we have the user stories.
Yeah.
So I think with this, I see that all the work, the prioritization of all the work should go via SIG 1, and that SIG 2 is then trying to adhere as much as possible to the priorities, right? But we have been working a little bit different, in my view, is that some changes that we were going to do were driven from SIG 2, in my view.
I see.
Yeah, absolutely. In the first two releases, that's how it went. Yeah.
In the first 2 releases, it was all SIG came from SIG 2 most of the time. Yeah. But what we are trying to say is that we should have a flow where a natural flow, how typical product work is. You get product management input, and then you try to accomplish it, right?
I thought the SIG one came from the release one came from SIG one use cases, right? So
Yes.
anyway, that was my understanding.
Yeah.
Yes
it's
and
true.
yes
Yeah,
and no.
correct, yeah. But okay,
Yes,
yeah, I think we are trying. I think we are starting to understand.
Yeah, I think we went very deep in this, but I hope it's
Okay.
clear for everybody. Okay.
So essentially, Tal, I think probably we should, okay, we can discuss this in SIG 1. I'll raise this topic in SIG 1 in the next week's meeting. My point is, again, I hope my point is clear. I want to make sure the foundation is solid, and there are some very huge gaps in our foundations that we need to fix, so that otherwise all these higher order functions that we're trying to do, they end up, that becomes so much complicated.
Yeah, I clarified in the notes here that I specifically was pushing for the decommissioning user story, because we can come up with it, but again, I'd like to hear from TELUS, from DT, from carriers. What does decommissioning mean for them? And it would be different in different carriers. Obviously, we won't be doing the complete scope of it, right? But where does Nefio participate in decommissioning, right? At the end of the day, they have their own system. So anyway, I hope this is all clear.
Yes, thank you, Tal. I
Okay.
think that's a good point. We will discuss it and we'll create a story for this, for both decommissioning cluster, decommissioning CNFs. And also, there is also one more story there. If I just, it says and status update. Status update is also another one. I think if I don't know, I wanted to understand maybe from Wim and Tal and Sagar, if you say, I want to understand a little bit more about in today's NF deployment, does the management cluster watch anything at all, or the status is not at all percolated to the management cluster?
So honestly, I'm not sure what's going to happen with observability, right? I think Stephen was kind of
It is
leading
not
that.
observability. It is less than observability, Tal.
Yeah,
This is
it's less than.
Yeah.
But I think it was discussed together, right? We understand that we want, or no? Okay.
I don't think so. They are focused on the workload side for now. But I think, so long story short, at the moment, it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the way it works today, Bala, is that you have, so it's reported in the root sync object of config sync. So you can see it on the workload cluster because we have config sync on the workload cluster. So if you want to get it to the management cluster, something needs to happen to convey that information.
But we also don't want it to be technology specific, right? If we're saying, like, if you use config sync, look at config sync. If you use Argo, look at Argo, right? The question is, do we want something more a general here, right? This connects a little bit to the discussion that that we were having on regarding adding a special resource, like a status resource, something like a Porch file or something else, right? The idea is, where is this status going, right? And the last I remember from this discussion, we said it would be maybe inside package variant, because if that's a high level API, that would be. The reason I'm mentioning the observability discussion, yes, technologically, we know it's not part of observability, but we're discussing it in terms of how do we get data from the workload clusters and where does it go? And we separated it into two piles, right? One pile is status and one pile is observability that we're, thinking about differently. But I think we kind of stopped that discussion, right? We ended up not implementing anything like that for R3. We were hoping, but it didn't get in. And to be honest, I think we need somebody to pick this up and drive it again. Stephen was driving it, but he's no longer participating. And I'm hoping somebody can pick up the glove and again, connect it to maybe.
I think, Tal,
yeah, go ahead.
I have a bit of a much more simplistic view on this personally, because here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, what we are trying to convey is whether the deployment has been successful, right? So in other words, who has that information? It's the operator on the workload cluster, right? And I think if you look to the OAI implementation today, it's actually reflecting that status in its CR that he got to get deployed, right? So what I think we are talking about, it's nothing to do with observability as a whole. It's basically how does that information get propagated back to the management cluster? And I keep it as simple as that, because that gives us enough information. If the operator needs more signals to convey that status, that's a different problem space in my view. But today, the issue that we have is that people are expecting the status that NF deployment gets in the workload cluster based on the operator that is dealing with it, gets reflected back to the management cluster. And keep it as simple as that. That's the problem statement I think that we have at hand.
Well,
Absolutely, I
okay,
totally
two
agree with Wim. Yeah.
questions. Yeah, I do understand what we're trying to get here, but the one question is, well, do we want to know if it's up or down? The fact that deployment succeeded, I think they want more information. Is, you know, maybe it succeeded and then immediately crashed, right? Do we want like status updates, just like, you know, Kubernetes pods get status updates, right? If they're alive, right?
So that's for me.
Wait a second, Wim. Second question is, so yeah, status can be a binary up or down, but if it's down, we want to know what failed. Do we want logs, right? Do we want like if there are a few stages to the deployment, do we want to know in which state it stopped and what the status error messages or whatever? So yeah, I understand like what we're looking for here, but I think it needs designing. I think it could be simple,
yeah,
but yeah.
But I think, see, the way I look at it, it's the aggregate status, right? So that we are trying to convey. And so what I'm trying to get to is, let's not throw in everything under the sun, right? Because we are making it way too complicated. I think we should just, and whether the NF deployment conveys subsets or pending statuses and stuff like that, I think we should be agnostic of that, because we should just percolate up all the information that the operator puts down in its status object. And there is a standard mechanism in Kubernetes to do that we can just leverage. And if it's not enough, okay, it's a problem of the operator to give more information, right? But today we have no means to actually get any information back.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I believe the focus point is really the aggregated information rather than all the details, because the details is something anyhow that the workload cluster that happens on the NF deployment itself, and that's not the problem that we are talking about here. We are talking about what is its status? It can be I am ongoing, right? But that's, for me, that's not where we are yet at. We are just trying to find a mechanism to convey that. And the way I look at it is everything that is in the status field of an NF deployment have a mechanism to convey that to the management cluster. It's as simple as that, I think, for now.
It's simple, but remember, you know, Google's code here provide a whole framework for doing that, a status aggregator. It's true that it exists in Kubernetes, but it exists inside the cluster. The idea that it will bubble up to a management cluster is not part of Kubernetes' design, right? But Vish, you had your hand up for a while. I want to make sure you have.
Yeah. Okay, I was just trying to understand, Tal, what you were trying to say. So it seems like I was thinking along the same lines as Wim about, like, you know, Kubernetes supports it, like, you know, per cluster, wherein you can also use things like get events, describe pods, and all that stuff. But you are saying that there's need for a propagation of those status to the management cluster. That's what I think you're trying to focus your discussion on, correct?
Yeah, like I think of it this way, like our northbound API is package variant. You create a package variant, but you have no idea, you know, or even a package variant set. And you want to make sure, you want to know if you know, it actually succeeded. It's a declarative API, so you're not getting like a return value, but you want to check it and see, okay, did it actually deploy, right? Are those network functions up? Is the infrastructure succeeded, right? So I think it's true. We want something simple here. We don't want like statistics or, you know, diagnostics. But even this is not. let's put it this way. It is simple what we want, but I don't think it's trivial to actually design it, right? And there's Google
Okay.
code that's contributed. It was part of the seed code of Nephio, and it kind of got dropped, right? So I'm not saying this is super duper hard, but it's also not trivial. And I think we just need somebody who is willing to drive this, to look at the code that we have, to examine it, to test it, and to actually define what the feature is and what the user story is. I just don't think we have complete clarity. So yeah, Wim,
So-
I'm not saying this is like a huge, huge deal, but it still needs to be handled properly. Fikra, somebody, Vish, you have finished your
Yeah,
thought?
Tal. So if you have a write-up, I mean, it seems like in your head it is very clear, seems like, Tal, about what the problem statement you're talking about. It'll be great if you can actually capture that either as an issue or as a discussion. That way some of us can like look at it and see whether we want to get involved and drive it.
So we have these documents that Stephen
Okay.
worked on. So you know what? I'm going to maybe reach out to Stephen and ask him maybe to give us an update of where he stopped, so
Okay.
that we just don't start from scratch, right? Because a lot of work has already been put into this question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, next is me, I think. So, Tal, I understand what you're saying. It needs to be designed, but let's not boil the ocean. It's what I'm thinking. I know if we had to have a common means to propagate the status along with the other things such as statistics and ongoing health of the system, that's a bigger problem. But today, I'm just looking at from the usability perspective. I deploy an app, I don't know what's going on. So I do not mind throwing away the design or throwing away the code in future if we have a better one at it, because that's a part of the software engineering lifecycle. We constantly refactor and throw away the design and code if it need be. But let's look at it from a very narrow use case, like Wim said. I did something, I deployed something, and hopefully we'll get to the undeployment too, decommission something. What's going on with it? It may be as simple as it's complete, it's in progress, it failed for this reason. So can we look at it in a very narrow way and do this? Because this is a very, very fundamental thing. And if we have to do this in a better way in future, considering other observability and health of the system aspects.
So Bala,
then
yes,
we tackle it.
that's exactly what we're talking about. But my point is, it's simple but not trivial. Even right now, think about config sync. It's its own system. So we push to a Git repo deployment, but we have no idea, right? If you from the management cluster's perspective, we have no idea if config sync actually synced it, right? It's a separate system. So we have to connect whatever that system is. And remember, we don't want it to be just config sync. There might be Argo, right? Or something else. So there has to be a way to put that status in. Yes, it's a very simple question, but it's not trivial technologically to answer, right? So we have code in Nephio to do this. It's the status aggregation framework. But as I said, we've never really used it in other than R1 a little bit. We have to go back to it and see what the status is and say, as you said, do we want to keep that code? Do we want to throw it out? Do we want to redesign it? Yeah, Fikra, you had your hand up for a while. Sorry, we didn't mean to dominate the conversation.
No, maybe, yeah, no, it might be slightly a naive question, but where does maybe this fits in with the later bullet point in relation to web UI, and where does it get its information? So if it was a very simple use case or simple example of being able to determine, what's up, what's down, maybe the web UI could, give a demo of that, a very simple demo of that.
It could show it, but it also doesn't know. It's like the same. Well, the web UI was designed, right? It came from Google seed code, and Google seed code did contain that status aggregation framework, right? So when Google contributed the Nephio code to Linux Foundation, it included that, right? So that was part of the design from the start. However, once it moved to us, we kind of took it apart to pieces, recreated user stories, and that kind of got lost. So I know Stephen and some of us here at Google worked on try to keep it up and reconnect it, but without clear user stories and with the whole design of, there was a lot of movement in the models early on in terms of NF deploy and all that. We completely redesigned the models. So it kind of got disconnected. The code no longer works, right, with our current models. And the question is, do we want to salvage that? Is that a good design? Honestly, I think it's not a great design. I think it should really be examined because there's a lot of questions there. It like starts its own server and it expects like agents in the workload clusters to call back to that server and tell them what the status is. I think there's a lot of questions about whether that was a good idea or not. So yeah, again, this is not so trivial, right? I think somebody really needs to pick this up and look at the whole story. What we want is simple, but providing that is not trivial. Sorry, I keep repeating myself, but I hope it's clear that there's something complex here. It's not, built into Kubernetes, right?
Yeah, especially the way we are doing with the total decoupled GitOps way. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's not. We are doing it decoupled right now. So, this came from Google because Google always uses this decoupled system with config sync, right? So you push to Git repo and then something pulls it, but those two systems don't talk to each other. And we're also not updating the Git repo, right? Config sync never does a push to the repo, a commit. But we want Nephew to work with other cloud delivery mechanisms, right? So it could be Red Hat, it could be Amazon, right? So there might be systems that are more closely coupled than what Google does. So we need to design it. We need to make sure that Nephew can work with any cloud, right? And not just config sync. Yeah, I'm from Google, I'm advocating Google's approach, but I'm expecting if we want this to be multi-cloud, we need to support other mechanisms as well. So yeah. Okay. I think we've exhausted the topic for now. But yes, this is a topic that needs to be revisited, right? Because it's definitely not finished. I think it's a big one. All right, if there's nothing more on this topic, if we can move on.
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, we can move on. We can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Fikra, I hope you would be able to do this today. Are you ready to give some sort of
Yeah,
slide?
no, I'll have to postpone, Tal, if that's okay, because I don't have access to the environments that I wanted. But yeah, just a high level. The change has gone in. Well, the initial change has gone in on the Nephew controllers, the approval controller, and we're down under an hour on the end-to-end, which is progress. It's still a bit flaky for the end-to-end, some of the end-to-end tests, but it's reduced the overall time by 35, 40 minutes. So
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I mean, we'd love to hear what the issue was and how it was solved. So yeah, it doesn't have to be very long, but I think getting, it's such a
there's a second piece that we had communication with John, and Isti has joined the conversation. Appreciate it. So there's a second piece to go in, essentially, or to a couple of other bits to go in to make it more stable. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we can do that next week. And we raised the question of whether we should get the team platform meeting up. Liam is still. Oh, Liam. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Welcome back to the
welcome
call.
back.
Yeah. Thank you.
So while you were gone, we finished Nephew, so we don't need your help anymore.
That's grand. I can go. I can find something else to do.
Yeah, maybe find some hobby.
Yeah.
But seriously, though, we probably still need your help. And yeah, you raised the question over whether it's a good idea to bring the team platform meeting back. And I thought we should discuss it with you.
Okay.
On the one hand, we could do everything in this meeting. The question is, will it get too technical and specific? For example, Fikra's presentation, say, or overview, small overview of auto approval and Porch, would that be better handled in a separate platform meeting? I can see pros and cons.
Yeah.
The big con is that, do we really want a separate meeting? Are we busy enough? And also, if it's a separate meeting, there will be less participation. So it ends up that people here won't know what's going on there. So, for example, if we do FICRA's overview in a separate meeting, then again, it will become kind of esoteric knowledge of the small cult of the porch people. Whereas there's an advantage to giving it more observability for the whole SIG2 team. So, we can better understand the issues and where we're standing, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just throwing some thoughts here, Liam, but I'd love to hear yours as well.
Yeah, I actually very much agree with you on all those points, Tal. I mean, there's a balance between, should we have a meeting just to have the meeting, or also are you excluding people? I don't know. Is there a need for a separate kind of platforms focused discussions? I don't know. My thought would be also maybe we could run it a bit earlier in the day. I don't know, maybe 9 o'clock your time, Tal, which would be an hour earlier than this, or even 8 a.m. your time. So that would be 7.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to raise an issue here. Actually, Linux Foundation did approach me and Wim about changing, doing a poll to see where the time is. But yeah, absolutely. If we bring it back, we can definitely poll for a better time for it. But the question is, should we have it in the first place? Another option is maybe not now, but maybe later when we move more into, say, implementing stuff.
That's probably a better idea, actually. Maybe start it. Maybe a good time would be after the face-to-face, when we kind of have a better focus on what actually we're doing, and we're getting more into the nitty-gritty of things. And anyway, there's nothing stopping us calling. One-off meetings either. So say if there was a meeting around the deletion of the clusters, there was a kind of specific, there was specific technical interest, and it was too long for just the SIG1 agenda. We can always call one-off meetings, I guess.
So one reason I would say to put the meetings now is that I raised this topic. I didn't get a lot of feedback from people, but I'm hoping before the summit in October that probably the platform team, or it could be other people joining the platform team, do some POCs over porch alternatives.
Yeah.
So that we can come to the summit with hands-on experience with the alternatives, so to help us make a decision. I'm really hoping, right, this is my personal hope, that after the summit, we come out with a clear vision for how we're going to handle the core in the future. I mean, it could be a roadmap, right? It doesn't have to be immediate, but I feel like we really can't drag it on another release. We have to know what the status of Porch is, how much we want to invest in it, if at all.
Absolutely.
And to be focused.
I
Secret, go
absolutely.
ahead.
Yeah, the other thing, actually, just when we're on the top, I know it's kind of a bit of going down a bit of a rabbit hole now, but it would be good to have some time, kind of on conference time at the summit. I know there'll probably be a kind of a set agenda for part of it, but maybe we can at this stage block out a day where we just sit in the room and discuss all this.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm specifically for the topic at hand here, if we should have a platform meeting per week, I think maybe we can, one option is to have that meeting now to coordinate these POCs regarding porch alternatives, right?
Yeah,
and that might be something that takes enough time that we don't want it to pick up the agenda here in the main meeting.
If I could interject very quickly, I think my intent with this was, to that point in that, when it comes to implementation detail around, features, changes, whatever, I don't think we have time in an hour here. Like, case in point, we discussed heavily the previous topic, so it eats into the hour here, that was my only motivation to maybe renew the team platform meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although I feel like we're you know, if you look at the items we have on the agenda, yeah, we push sometimes things to the next week or two, but we're mostly handling it. I don't know if we're quite overflowing yet. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with Fikra. You know, that I was under the impression that for release 4, that we were going to start taking Porch piece by piece and start kind of re-implementing things to make Porch more of a product-like feature going forward. And I feel like Porch as its own and the main component is Nephew gets lost in this meeting kind of week on week. And based on that then as well, you know, I don't know if coming up with more POCs is the answer here. I really think we need to sit down and see, you know, what are the pieces of Porch that we want to fix and kind of make it a product instead of going away POCing and having so many different alternatives to, you know, sit down, because I think we'll lose another release in that.
Yeah, this is, you know, I share that same sense of urgency. That's why I want us to not go beyond the October summit in terms of dragging this on. The problem right now, Paul, is that we're not all united over what the future of Porch is. So if we sit down now and start re-engineering Porch and fixing it, where we're not sure that the community as a whole would be able to maintain it into the future, I think that's not a good use of our time, right? So I think as soon as possible, we need to come up with a roadmap for the future. Are we going to invest in Porch, or are we going to move to a more mature platform out there that we can piggyback on and maybe add features that Nephew specifically needs? It's a big question. SIG1 is examining it now from their perspective in terms of setting the requirements and seeing what meets the requirements. But I think what we could do in SIG2, and this is just my proposal, again, I'm not deciding for us, but my proposal is that we would use, say, the next 2 months to not necessarily fix all the issues with Porch, right? Because that would require sitting down and redesigning and creating a roadmap for, say, a Porch 2.0, which, by the way, Wim, I think, created a pretty good idea of how that could look, right? But it's not trivial to get there. It can take many months to redesign a Porch 2.0, right? But the question is, like, can we look at the other options and get some hands-on data in terms of, hey, let's say we migrate to Argo. What would that entail? Is that even realistic? Is that a good idea? Could we redo everything in Ansible, right? That's a question that I asked that I actually think could possibly even be a good idea, right? We just have other options on the table. We have my experiment with TKO. We have this new project from Nokia, right? And so you see, Paul, I think it's just not, we're not clear what to do quite yet. But instead of, I think, sitting and twiddling our thumbs and just worrying about what the future is, I think we can actually do work right now to help us understand and gain knowledge over the choices we have before us, if that makes sense. And that could mean that, yes, let's revive those platform meetings where we can discuss, say, an Argo POC and Ansible POC, etc., right? Flux POC. Does that make sense at all? I wonder. I'm not.
But who does that work though? Do you know what I mean? Who's going to do? Who's going to do those products?
So the platform team, we can divide and say, hey, who's interested in the specific technology? You know, is somebody interested in Argo? Okay, they can manage the Argo POC. I mean, we can divide this between us, the people in the platform team. A single person can work on each POC, or two, or I don't know.
Okay.
This is what I'm proposing, that would be a good use of our time right now, rather than fixing Porch where we don't know if we're going to stay with Porch in the future. And this is a limited time, right? I'm not saying let's do these POCs forever. I'm saying our deadline is the summit, and the idea is to come to the summit with these POCs, right? And a presentation of, for every person working on the POC can give a presentation. Well, this is my experience trying to implement Nefio features, say on Argo. This is what I think would be missing to make it possible. Or the conclusion can be like, hey, drop this. This is not a good avenue to pursue because Argo would never be able to do what we want it to do, for example. Vish, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, one, I think in general, we are starved for time. I think what you're suggesting is also good, but in general, like, I know the SIG1 has actually started off some comparison table, right? To be able to, at least this is my personal view, right? To look at an alternative, right? I want to be at least able to, I think I brought this up in the past too. The equivalent of a product requirements document if you had for Poach. I don't know if you, in your mind, Tal, if you already think you have that, and that is how you're going to compare it with the different POCs, can you make that available to everybody else as well? That way we know what to look out for and what to do a POC, what the goals would be, right? That would help make a apple to apple comparison is what I'm thinking, right? If somebody were to look at, hey, this is what Poach is trying to solve, and these are the feature requirements, and these are the areas, problem areas. If you have that understanding, then it might be easy to go or like, look for alternatives. It's my personal opinion. Again, I could be wrong. Does it make sense what I'm trying to say?
Sure. I propose that we can take the simplest user story that we've ever had, look at R1 of the Free5DC simplest user story, and say that would be something we can try to implement in the POC. Go ahead, Wim. Wim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, see, I think I said it into the Slack. We are that technologies from my perspective. I still believe the question we need to answer first is what does people make? What is it that make people deploy Nefio? And it might very well be that that layer might not be needed at all. So from my perspective, it's not because you build a new port that people all of a sudden will deploy Nefio. And that's for me the fundamental question that we have to ask, I think, together, right?
So I think that's a parallel question. It's a very important one, but we're at release 3 right now, going on release 4. So yeah, it's important to go back to the fundamentals, but on the other hand, we are going to keep moving in the direction we have. It will be nudged, it will be sharpened, it could change, but we are on track with user stories that keep the current process intact. But again, something happened along the way where Porch lost its support from Google, right? So
yeah, but I think Tal, see, the way is the following. So we can still, with what we have, develop some of these use cases, right? But I don't believe, if I'm honest, the use case that I see right now, are they going to have people deploy Nefio at the end of the day? Right? Because we are all here at least the way I look at this, I want to build something that people are going to consume, right? I'm not here for the fun and having a good time. I'm here to actually build something that will people deploy at the end of the day. And if that's not the goal, then yeah, what are we trying to accomplish here?
But I hope that what I'm saying is exactly on that point, right? The idea is that Porch right now is experimental. We have very serious issues that need to be fixed. So the question is, do we sit down and devote a lot of time to fixing these issues, maybe rewriting, doing a Porch 2.0, maybe switching to your work? I mean, these are just big questions, and I think we need to answer them. So I'm not suggesting keeping this open-ended and keep debating philosophically forever at all. My whole point is, let's do this in a contained manner. We have a summit coming up, and I think we have enough of a window to go to that summit. Yes, I'm agreeing with you entirely, right? And I'm saying that I don't want Nefio to be just kind of a philosophical experiment here, right? The idea is that it could eventually become something production ready. And yeah, we're at a crossroads right now where we have to decide what we're going to invest in the future technologically. And are we going to be distracted by putting all our resources into developing a Porch-based product where we're basically creating another orchestrator? Or is it better to offload all that to an external project where we can really focus on the network function stuff like you suggest as well, right? So
I mean, I'm not suggesting, I'm asking the question, what makes it that people get adopt Nephew, right? I'm behind the technology conversation and stuff like that, right? So I'm in love with the technology, don't get me wrong. But at the end, let's say, let me put it differently. Let's say that the community says, you need to do something, and I'm not saying what it is, that has nothing to do with Porch, right? And that is going to make Nephew deploy, then this conversation is void.
Well, it's not. Okay, so the reason I don't think it's void is that, well, whatever we do will have to require some orchestration component. And the question is, do we use something off the shelf and mature, or do we own something ourselves? If we own something ourselves, it's a huge commitment for maintaining it. And I think that's the question for us. Do we feel like whatever our requirements are, you know, so far they involved something innovative, right? The configuration as data approach. I think we all agree that there's nothing out there exactly like Porch, right? So the question is it worth investing on something unique and innovative? Or maybe we should abandon this innovative approach and do something that's much more conventional in terms of orchestration.
But yeah, you're from the assumption that the orchestration component is important. I'm not making that reflection yet. That's the difference.
Well, if it's, I think I'm exactly asking the same question. Is it important or not? If it's not important, then let's not develop our own one. Let's just use something, and whatever it is, we'll just adapt to using it. If we choose Argo, let's just do whatever Argo recommends we do and not try to innovate or do something special. If it is important for us, then yeah, we have to own something and create some sort of piece of software, whether it's our own or it's an add-on or something else. So I'm agreeing with you, Wim, but I'm just saying that I do think our choice of technology or investment is necessary to make here. And again, I don't want to drag it on. I want us to reach that kind of consensus as a community as soon as we can, because otherwise we're going to have, you know, we've invested so much of volunteer time here on like fixing issues with Porch and testing and releasing, etc. Honestly, this has been most of our SIG2 energy has been on the platform. So I wonder if this is a good use of all of our time or not. And rather than, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound, you know, the sunk cost fallacy, are we going to continue doing this, or is it best to just abandon this approach and focus on other things? So, yeah, I'd love to hear other people's perspective on this, right? If anybody wants to jump in.
Just wanted to add that there are some things in Porch that I was like thinking was unique, like, you know, this package variant sets, which I thought, and of course, KPD was there, the KPD file, using those, being able to use those functions, container functions to be able to manipulate your KRM file. So those I thought were something unique that Porch and KPD brought along, right? Otherwise, Nephew is a solution using this, basically. So those are the thoughts in my head, at least. Like, hey, what is unique about this?
100%, I agree with that. It is unique. The question is, do we need that uniqueness? Do we need this kind of innovation?
Yeah, when I look at those, like, you know, if I have to go off and create multiple versions of a certain template, do I have a programmatic way of doing it? That I see like, oh, it's a value add here. I mean, that's me thinking that way, right? Otherwise, I have to go manually create them, and I need to go manually edit them. But this gives that particular way to do it.
But I think, Rich, there is other ways
general,
to achieve that, right? There's other ways to achieve that, right? There's
there are other ways to
achieve that.
So we can actually go into those other ways, and then we can spend another 1 year, and it'll also have the same kind of issues that we'll get. But maybe then it will be like we own it. That could be the only different thing. Yeah.
But I think, Vish, my point is this, right? Will this make it that people deploy Nephew? That's for me the fundamental question.
Yeah, you have to look at when you say deploy Nefio, I mean, in my case, you can say deploy Nefio, but I'm looking only at Porch when I look at Nefio in my
Yeah, correct. So,
right?
and I'm not doing that. So I'm basically saying we are doing something here as a community, right?
Yeah.
What is it that's going to make it such that people are going to use it? That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, some of those folks, I mean, this is again, I said this in the last October summit too, when I was looking at it. I was like, I see the value of being able to deploy to multi-sites, making sure approval happens, making sure you can do some customizations, those iteration techniques. Those are all still
Yeah, correct. But
things that
let me
can
put
be
it
used to.
let me put it differently, Vish. You have ACM, right? In
Yeah.
Red Hat. Okay.
Mhm.
So what is it? Why would you change your system to something else?
I mean, I would still use ACM. I mean, I'll see this as
Okay.
being complementary. Like, if it is complementary, like, yeah, I can go off and register some repositories here. I can go actually give a designer a chance to go deploy, create a template, and then I give a deployer a way to go customize this. Or,
And why would
those
Red
are
Hat
all
not
things
do
that
it by
can be added on.
Yeah. Yes, but would Red Hat not do it by themselves? Is it really meaningful in the market? Would you not build it yourself?
I mean, see, Red Hat is an open source company, right? So we
Yeah,
always
correct.
trying to be participate in projects that do open source, and
Okay.
then we also subscribe it. Our means of getting revenue is the subscription. If you see value in a certain open source project, we go contribute to it, make it part of a product, and through a subscription we gain our revenues. So if you see a value here, if you see this value, that's going to help. He'll probably contribute. He'll continue to contribute.
Well, I'd personally love to see an ACM plus Nefio story. I'm not sure how that would look, but in any case, we have 1 minute left. I'll give Bala the last word. Bala, summarize the universe for us, please.
Okay. So yeah, thanks, Tala. So essentially what I view Porch as a multiplexer, it takes an artifact, it multiplexes into multiple artifacts by customizing for each site. That's essentially what it does in a very nutshell. A multiplexer which has the ability to customize the multiplexed artifacts to each individual site. It's essentially an automation tool. In my view, it can be achieved multiple ways. Like you said, Tal, it can be done with Ansible too, or ACM does it too through policies, for like Wim said. We have a policy engine, and then the policy engine does something similar. So I think it's a very valid question you're asking, Tal. And then I also agree with some of the points with Wim as well. So, I mean, if that automation tool is becoming very expensive to maintain, or it has so much of, if we think it is not what we want, then obviously then the question is very valid. I think we should look at the possibilities, and I think it is what you're suggesting is good, Tom. But I think, do you think that can happen for the time of the for the summit? That's the only question I have.
I think so. I think we have 2 months or so to create simple POCs, and they can be very simple. I mean, and they can end really quickly. Like you can start doing work on Argo, spend a week, and say, I'm stuck. It just can't work, right? I mean, that could be the result of the POC. These are experiments that can fail, to be clear. I'm not saying that there's a goal here to come out with something that completely works. I'm pretty confident.
At least we have two solutions in my view. One what Wim presented, and one what you presented, Tal. At least
yeah,
we should.
well, also Argo,
yeah.
also looking at Argo, also looking at Ansible. That's something that I've started working on and I want to finish. I'm actually very confident that you can use Ansible Tower instead of Porch. Wouldn't that be amazing? That would be like the simplest and most straightforward and most mature solution. And I think actually it's very viable. But I need to test it more to convince myself entirely, right? But yeah, so okay, we're out of time here, but I'm going to use my very, very minimal authority as chair here to say that let's please next week decide whether we accept my proposal here that we work on these POCs or not. we've done some discussion. So if you disagree with me, just please say, no, Tal, I don't think it's a good idea to do this right now. I can't force anybody to do anything, of course. So, you know, I'm making this an official proposal from me that we work on POCs for these porch alternatives to prepare something for the summit. And if people think it's a bad idea, then we won't do it. How does that sound? So think about this for a bit, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
That's all I can ask.
Sounds good.
All right. I thank you, everybody. I think we had a really interesting discussions today, so much appreciated. And who knows, we might get that platform meeting back in the week. So we'll try to decide next week what to do. Thank you, and have a great day, everybody. Your participation was much appreciated.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.